There are a few reasons why people say cleanliness is next to godliness. Now, most people don't think about this, but in truth, it clears one's consciousness. It feels good when one has less clutter in the house, when it has less dirt, when there is less grime, just basically on the floors and the carpet, whatever, in one's house. Then the house is basically a clearer space for thought. Thought isn't something that it just reacts to itself. Thought is something that reacts to environment. What we think, what we feel as far as emotions go, they are in reaction a lot of the time, especially someone who is not very spiritual, in reaction to our environment, to people we talk to. That's why, I mean, cleanliness is next to godliness can be applied to the crowd that we associate with. But recently, I have cleaned my shrine and cleaned all the aspects of God on my shrine, and also cleaned my vote out space. And I'll go ahead and show basically how clean it is right now. I mean, it's not a big deal, but. And then I also cleaned my vote out space, which is over here, and that's fairly clean. Now, why it's good to minimize how much you have on your shrine, how much you have on your altar, your spiritual workspace, is that you don't want a whole bunch of thoughts associated with a bunch of items working at the same time when you're trying to do specific things on an altar or a shrine. When you're trying to recognize God, when you're trying to operate in a spell system, when you're trying to draw certain energies toward yourself, you don't want a lot of factors. You don't want a lot of symbols that will draw a lot of thoughts, but also a lot of clutter that basically you just don't need for your workings and whatever system you're working in, whether it be religious, spiritual, magical, it doesn't matter. And in general, when you have a dirty shrine, when you have a dirty house, period, even if it's not, even if you're not spiritual at all and you're completely atheistic, you have a dirty house, it'll draw forces, it'll draw even spirits sometimes and energies that are attached to disorder, that are attached to dirtiness, that are attached to confusion of workspace, of household. And these will confuse you. They will inhibit your ability to connect to higher powers than yourself. And that's why I would highly recommend cleaning as much as you can if you're a spiritual person, if you're a religious person, or if you just want to think more clearly as an individual. I'd highly recommend being very clean in your house and especially in your workspace, even if you're not spiritual or religious and don't believe in any of this. It's much better to be clean in general and to minimize the amount of items you have so that you can try and focus on what you're working on at any given time. And just in the realm of the mind, cleanliness is next to godliness. Just inside your head, when you are trying to focus on a specific task, it is best to try and block out or minimize the presence of thoughts relating to other tasks. Now, this is very difficult for people who are OCD, perfectionists, or people who basically can't keep their mind focused. But the learning the ability to block out thoughts that you've had from previous times of the day, or previous projects you've worked on, or just thoughts in general that aren't related to what you're working on, even if it's just a study, if it's reading, if it's spiritual work, if it's trying to do something for your job, trying to work on something that requires thought and not just physical labor for your job, and you're doing this at home. Of course, you can clean your workspace at work, but if it's at home, you have much more freedom to do so. Whether it's any of these things, to have all the clear space that you need in your mind, literally in your mind, to have all that And when I say go to your workspace and clean, and when I'm referring to the mind, I mean basically just focus on your work there. But if it's even at your home, you try to clear off every single mental table. You try to clear off the ideas that you operate from, whether it be the compassion or your specific duty, or the amount of work you usually do for a day, or the kind of work you usually do. Try to clear off those basic foundations in your mind of how you operate, and try to build off of those stations mentally by focusing on a specific task. You put aside everything else in your mind that you've attached to your job, that you've attached to your workspace mentally, that you've attached to your intellectual stuff mentally, or your relationship to people at your workplace mentally. You can almost etch out or sketch an entire a replica of the building you work in your mind, and just clear off all of those areas so that you can use every single one of those areas mentally, every single one of those ideas, to further what you're working on at your work, or at home, especially when you can clear off all the altars and shrines in your mind, because everything in your mind is an equivalency of something that is external. You have equivalencies of everything in your mind. Everything that you see externally, you have equivalencies of that. So if you're at home and you want to clear off space within yourself, within your mind, to work towards a specific goal, it's best to have the ability to put aside past ideas, to put aside worries that you constantly have, or that I've had recently, or growing developments in your ideology or thought processes immediately. Be able to put all that aside and clear off your workspaces mentally to build upon the foundation and for a certain project that you're working on. And this may seem very convoluted and complex and probably allegorical, but if we can learn to put aside everything else in our mind, basically, is what it boils down to, and focus on what we're trying to do right now, that is what cleanliness is next to godliness means. It means that you put aside everything else, you have clear space, and you work on what you want to work on right now. That's what it means. Even in the literal world, not just the metaphorical world. And that's all I really got to say about cleanliness is next to godliness. But if you have any thoughts about this, feel free to shoot them down in the comment section. And if you enjoyed any of this, if you thought any of it was interesting, then hit that thumbs up down there. And I'm very glad that you watched this, and y'all have a great one.